G'day, Michael from Ironbark Game Studio, and welcome to the third part of this series, which will focus on a new modelling technique, sculpting. So sculpting in 3D is the digital equivalent to clay sculpting, where you can push, pull, smooth, remove and add to the surface of a model. Sculpting the head of the character will provide a good introduction to this technique and will allow for a high level of detail to be achieved. So in Blender I have my modelled character from the last two parts. And I've just come up here and named all of the different pieces that we've created, so just to keep things nice and organised, and I've still got my template images up here as well, which I'll use for the head modelling. And to get into sculpting, I'm just going to first hide the helmet here, so I'm going to select it and press H. And I'm going to add a cube to the scene. Shift A, Mesh, and Cube. Just going to scale this down and bring it up into position. So get it roughly the size of the head based off our template image. Doesn't have to be too precise just yet. So we'll go for something like that. And we're going to add a modifier to this. So I'm going to go to my modifier properties here, add modifier, and I'm going to choose a subdivision surface. And I'm going to bump this up to 3 levels in the viewport here. So essentially what this subdivision modifier is doing is it's adding more geometry to our cube, but it's also rounding off the edges as well, so it's essentially turning our cube into a sphere. I'm going to apply my modifier, so I need to go out of edit mode first, and then I'll click on this drop down, and then click apply. And now we have some more geometry to work with. In theory, you could also just start off with a sphere as well, either or works. So I'm going to go across from the layout tab up here to the sculpting tab there. And you need to make sure you have the object selected before you go into the sculpting tab. So currently I've got the this sphere selected. So when I'm sculpting, it's going to be sculpting this sphere only and no other part of the body there. First thing we need to do is turn on symmetry. So coming up to the top right here, I'm going to turn symmetry on the x-axis, so whatever I do on one side is going to occur on the other. So a little bit of an introduction to the tools and shortcuts here in the sculpting view. So on the left hand side we have all of our sculpting tools there. By default you're just going to be on the draw tool. Up the top here we have the settings of our brush or our tool. So we have a radius and we've got a strength, which are the main ones there. The shortcut for changing these, if you press F and then move the mouse, this is going to change the radius. So F, move the mouse and just left click. And then to change the strength, press Shift F and then left click, and that will change the strength. So F and Shift F. Another shortcut we'll be using later is if you hold down Shift, that's going to toggle on the smooth tool. So when you left click and drag, that's going to smooth off the mesh. And if you hold down Control, that's going to invert the tool. So by default, this draw tool will be pulling out of the mesh, but if I hold down Control, it's going to be pushing into the mesh. The first sculpting tool though that we want to work with is the grab tool. So the grab is here. And I want to grab out this geometry in the basic shape of the head. So I'm going to sort of go into to the sort of front and side views, and I'm going to try and grab out the geometry and kind of line it up with our template. And you're going to be a little bit careful to actually grab the geometry that you want. So I might just grab this up first, grab that out, and let's go into the front and start grabbing this out to line it all up. So I'm just using a nice big brush to start off with, and I'm just grabbing these sort of outside edges, pulling them into position. So we'll go with something like this for now. At this early stage, there's not a lot of shaping you can do before you run out of geometry to push and pull around. So the key to sculpting is to use the least amount of geometry as possible, add some shaping, before increasing the poly count and then adding the next level of detail. So to add that next level of detail, we need more polys. So there's two ways to add this in. I'm going to hit Shift R, And you're going to get this grid here, and you can just slide the mouse, and this grid represents essentially how dense you want the mesh. And we want to go for about 0.005, so I'll move my mouse to about there, and I'll just left click. This hasn't applied anything yet. To apply it, you then need to hit Control R. So this mesh has now been subdivided with new geometry, but unlike the subdivision modifier, it doesn't actually round off faces. So you've got more geometry to work with, but it doesn't actually change the shaping as such. The other way to set what is the voxel size, so that's what we just did, we set the voxel size. If you come up to the top right hand corner here under Remesh, we can see the voxel size 0.005, so that's what we set with Shift R with that grid there. And that Control R is essentially hitting Remesh there. So I want to smooth off this geometry, and I want to keep working on the next level of detail. So to smooth off the geometry, you can either come here across to the Smooth tool there, or you can just hold Shift on the currently selected tool and then just left click and drag. That's going to smooth it off there, so you don't actually have to switch to the Smooth tool. So I'm just going to roughly smooth this off, and then I'm going to add in some more details. With small details, I'm also going to grab a smaller brush size as well. Now that we've got more geometry, we can also pull out the neck. Let's actually grab a big brush for this one and just drag this all down and make sure to pull this all out across so it sort of fits within the neck hole of the armor. Do a bit of shaping around the chin and the cheeks and jaw. Again, we don't have that much geometry to work with at the moment though, so keep it fairly basic. I think that's looking pretty good, so we can add the next level of detail now. So I'm going to increase the voxel size to 0.0025. So I'll come up to the Remesh menu, or we can go Shift R. But let's set 0.0025, and then I'll click on Remesh. So that's going to add more geometry. Again, it's not going to change the shaping or anything like that, so we do still need to smooth it out and add our details. And I want to block in the main facial features, so I'll do this with the Draw tool. And just going to sort of draw in where the jawline's going to be, sort of really differentiate that from the neck area. Might decrease the strength of the brush slightly there. And I want to bring out the cheekbones a little bit as well. I'm going to block out the nose here. Is going to be an alien, so it's sort of going to have this wide triangular sort of nose. Smooth tool a little bit too strong, so you do have to go into the Smooth tool and manually reduce the strength inside of here. Maybe about 0.4, then we come back to the Draw, and then when we smooth it in the Draw tool, it's not as harsh. Go into the side view and block out where the lips are going to be. Might even just grab them out around there. Now that we know where they are, we can just sort of draw them in a little bit. Again, we don't have a whole lot of detail to work with. And let's block out the eyes. I'm just going to grab the Draw tool here, and I'm just going to hold down Control and just indent them inwards. And I'm just going to shape them kind of following what would be the shape of the skull. Okay, coming up to the head, I'm going to add this sort of sail or crest, so I'm going to sculpt in some detail there. Okay, and I'm going to use the draw brush to start off drawing this sort of sail on top of the head. And I'm not going to get too far before I start running out of geometry, so essentially what we're doing here is we're pulling out existing geometry and kind of pulling it upwards. So the more I pull it upwards, the less dense it's going to appear. So if I hold down tab, we can see that we've got this sort of higher density of polys down here, but as soon as we've started with the crest and we're pulling it up, the vertices become fewer and fewer. So we're going to introduce a new technique where we actually add geometry as we sculpt. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to turn on this button Dyntopo. I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to set the detail size to 250 pixels. And I'm going to set the detailing to constant detail. So that means we're going to get a constant amount of detail and it's not going to change based on how far zoomed in or out we are from the mesh. So this is going to add additional geometry to our mesh. So I'm going to come down here to the snake hook tool and I'm going to just start pulling out geometry from the mesh here. Let's turn that strength up. And as we do this, it's actually going to add new geometry as we move this out. So as opposed to just pulling out the existing geometry, we're adding new geometry. And now let's just clean this all up with the grab tool and smoothing everything out. And we're just going to taper this all in so it thins towards the top. Might come into the smooth tool and just turn down the strength even more. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good at this level of detail. So I could keep using Dyntopo. So if I just keep increasing the resolution, I can have finer and finer details if I use something like the snake hook tool to keep adding in those details. But I'm just going to turn that off for now, and I'm just going to do another remesh. So I'll come into the remesh, and I'm going to go 0.001 this time, and hit remesh. And now we're at a vertex count of about 200,000, and we can start refining more of those details. So we're going to be coming in, we're going to be doing the eyelids and the lips now. Let's grab the draw tool and block in those details. And the higher the resolution of our mesh, the more time it's going to take to start refining all of these finer details. And let's come down to the lips and start adding some shaping to that. Just using the template, so I'm making sure that nothing's too out of line. Just gonna try and set in where the gap between the lips is gonna be. So we can use the crease brush here, and let's just draw in, kind of really define where we want that that sort of parting to be. Then we'll just straighten everything back up with the grab tool. Just coming in here and defining the chin a bit better now that we've got some more geometry. Okay, now that we've got a pretty good shape, I want to get some eyes in here so that we can sort of start shaping around where the eyes are going to be. So I'm going to get out of the sculpting tabs. I'm going to go back into layout. I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to add in a UV sphere. And for the sphere, just going to reduce these segments and rings to 16. Doesn't need to be that high poly. We'll go into edit mode, scale it down, grab it up. And I'm going to move this into position over one eye. And I'm going to rotate it on the X by 90 degrees, just so that we have the point facing forward. So this is where the iris would be. And our alien's going to have fairly sort of large eyes. So I'll go something like this. And then we'll add in a mirror modifier. And let's just shade them smooth. And we'll get them into position. So we're going to have to do a fair bit of shaping around the front to get this looking good. I think something like that for now. And I might as well just select my head, right click and shade that smooth too, so it looks a bit nicer whilst we're working on it. And then making sure we've got the head selected, let's go back into the sculpting tab. And from here, we're just going to be using the grab tool a fair bit to move around, or move the eyelids around the eye. And just holding down Shift to smooth off the eyelids. I think the nose is looking a little bit too big, so let's sort of shape it in. Still want this kind of triangular look. And I want to get some more definition to my sort of creased area, so let's just grab the crease brush again and really get in there and try to make them a bit sharper. Again, we don't have a huge amount of density in our polys to get too much, but this will help on the next step when we add more geometry. And we'll sort of crease around the nose a bit and really define that. Kind of want to do this around the edge of the mouth as well. Again, just really define where the lips are. And we'll also sort of crease around that crest and sail part of the head. Sort of sharpen things up. Alright, I think that's looking pretty good so far. Just sort of come around with the final pass and hold down shift to smooth off any jagged edges. I just crease all the way down the base here as well. Taper that more to a point down there. Alright, maybe even smooth off these little bits as well. Maybe we'll even come down here and find this jawline as well as under the chin and neck area. Might even pull the eyelids a little bit closer around the eyes. And we'll create some little indents for the nostrils too. Doesn't look like there's much geometry around here to play with, so we'll need to wait for another remesh before we can start adding those details in there. Okay, keep making sure to save your work. Each time we remesh this and add new geometry to it, it's going to take longer and longer for Blender to compute it. Depending on your computer and how fast it is, will depend on how many more sort of remesh divisions you can go. I'm going to go one more so I can add some even further refinement to my mesh here. So remesh, I'm going to go 0.0005. 0.005 and then hit remesh. Alright, cool. And we can see where our face and vertices, they're getting close to 1 million, which is not uncommon, but on slower computers it may start to slow things down a little bit, so just be a little bit aware of your poly count and how dense you're going with the voxel size. So let's make some adjustments, and really the aim at this stage is to really refine some of those finer areas like the eyelids, the lips and the nose there. So we're going to be using the draw tool, will be our main one. We've also got draw sharp, grab, and crease. So I'm using a lot of smoothing at this stage. Really want to make sure those voxels, all those extra faces that we added are nice and smooth. Keep going to that side view, making sure that I've still got it sort of nicely lined up with that template. We'll grab the crease brush again and really define that seam between the lips there. And another tool I'm going to use is the pinch tool here. And the pinch tool, you can use it to really sort of define the separation points between the lips and the face. You can even use it for the crease in between as well. Might even use it around the eyelids as well. Pretty similar to the crease tool. Just keep coming around and smoothing off those areas, holding down Shift. Come around the sail on the head, just smooth off all those sort of rough edges. Really get a nice point in there. Possibly gone a little bit too much. So what I can use is the inflate tool and just sort of bring that out. I've definitely neglected the neck a bit, so it's looking a little rough. I might come into the smooth tool and really bump up the strength of it and really smooth all this down. Then just reduce that strength when we get to the finer details which we've added. A little rough in here, so let's bring the strength up, smooth all that down. Might just do some final grabbing and shaping of the head. So define that neck a little bit better as well. Like I said, I kind of neglected it a little bit during the other stages. And I'm just trying to get some more sort of slanted, slighter, more feminine looks to it. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the results there. Of course, I could do some more refining, adding even more details to it. But at this stage, we're going to call it for the sculpt. Now, there's one more thing we can do to add some finer details without having to actually manually sculpt it in, and that is with alpha brushes. So alpha brushes are essentially going to allow us to stamp on details like a texture. So I'm going to go to the draw tool up here. I'm going to come across and I'm going to essentially add a new brush or tool that we can use. So I'm going to click on this add brush button here. And that gives us a sculpt draw.001. If we click on the brush thumbnail, we've got two here. We've got the default sculpt draw and the one we just created. I'm going to rename this to something like stamp. So now we can actually switch between them. We know what they are. And with my stamp, I'm going to come down to the texture and I'm going to add a new texture. Now we need to select a file which we're going to be using for our alpha brush. So I'm going to come across to the ZBrush resource center, which has a few alphas which you can download for free. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to select the skins tab here, and I'm going to grab this this alien skin number 12. So I'm going to download this this file here. It's going to be in a zip file, so you just need to extract that and then switch across back into Blender. I'm going to come down to the texture properties here, and then I'm going to go into Open. I'm going to find where I've saved my file. So in this case, it's a PSD file, so pretty much any image file will work, including Photoshop files. So I'm going to select that one there. And we can see the texture appear. It's a black and white image. Essentially how this works is that the white is going to add height to the sculpt, and then the darker it becomes, the lower that height becomes until it gets to black, where it doesn't add any height to it. I'm going to go back into the active tool, where we should see our texture appear in there. And if we wanted to add additional textures in here, so say we've got multiple stamps that we've downloaded and we want to use, just click on this little shield button here, this fake user button. The reason why you have to do this is if you have an image or a file in Blender and it's not associated with anything, it's going to get deleted once you close Blender. So ticking on this little shield button here, even if we're not using this particular texture for anything, it's going to get saved in the Blender file when we open it up next. Then all you've got to do is click on the Add Texture button, and then for this new texture, come down in here, open up a new one, and then you'll have multiple textures that you can select from for your brush. I'm just going to stick with the one for now. The next setting we're going to change is under Mapping. We're going to set this to View Plane. And then under Stroke, we're going to set the stroke method from Space to Anchored. So what this is going to allow us to do is essentially stamp on, rotate and scale the detail as we go along. But you can change the mapping method to whatever you want. Stencil is another good one, so you can add a stencil to the frame and then just draw inside the stencil. But we'll just use the anchored view plane for now. So now all we've got to do is start drawing on some details. So if you left click and drag, that is going to essentially sculpt on or draw on that stencil there. Same shortcuts as before. F will adjust the size of your brush. And then Shift F will adjust the strength of the brush. So don't go too high, otherwise the details are really gonna stick out like that. Maybe if you're doing scales or something a bit harder. Let's go for something like 0.3. And I'm just kind of gonna draw on these skin details around the crest. Just going to rotate it to give it a little bit of variation. Assuming we've got the X mirror still turned on, it's going to appear on the other side as well. And if it sort of overlaps a little bit, you can always just hold down Shift and just smooth it out again. I think I do want some more of this subtle skin texturing detail along the crest and around the head and neck, so I'll just reduce the strength of the brush there. Going to reduce the strength even more as we sort of get in towards the face. Still want some of that kind of skin detail in there. Just some subtle texturing detail in there. And with that, I think we're pretty much done. We could add some further refinement to the shaping. Of course, it is better to do the shaping at the start, but there's no reason why you can't just get the grab tool and just start manually pushing and pulling everything in. So I think the head's a little bit sort of too far back, so we could just grab all this and reshape it. But I think that's just about going to do us there. So I'm going to save this. And then once we're done, we can just go back into our layer tab. And there we go, our character's really coming along now. So we've got our body and all of the armor modeled. We've got the head sculpted there. And that's going to do it for this video. So far things are really coming along. The modeling of the character is basically done. However, we can't expect just to import a high poly sculpt into a game engine. So we have a look at our tries, we're at 1.6 million there, which is obviously way too much if we want to bring this into something like Unity or Unreal. So we need to be able to reduce our sculpt of a couple of million tries down to just a couple of thousand. So this is the process of retopology, and that's going to be the next tutorial where we're going to reconstruct the head out of polys to drastically reduce the poly count and create nice edge flow. Don't worry though, because we're not going to lose all of that sculpting detail that we've created, as this is going to be baked back onto the low poly mesh when we get into texturing. Thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful. You can check out our Patreon link in the description for a variety of rewards such as starting files, tutorial notes, and early access to the rest of the series. And I'll see you in the next one.